Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Joseph Gartner. Joseph is the Director of Data Science at ClosedLoop.ai. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, JP, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So, Joe, let's start with a quick background of yourself. Can you give us a bit of an overview of your journey in technology, from where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, and taking us up to where you are today?
So I'm very fortunate in that I had exposure to technology and kind of computing from a very early age. My dad was doing data backup and data storage for the Cleveland Clinic for as long as I can remember. So I've always been around computers. I don't know that I was really passionate about kind of computer science until kind of later in life. My academic training was in physics, and so computing was always a means to an end for me. I was really interested in the physics that I was doing, but that was really where I got cut on like analytic modeling. So the type of physics that I studied was high energy particle physics. My dissertation was at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. And if you look at the landscape of data science, you'll notice that there are an awful lot of us particle physicists scattered about. And the idea is that there's like a very natural transition there, right? Because you're doing like large scale data analytics using statistical reasoning to solve problems. And more, I think modern particle physicists are using machine learning actually to solve problems too. So that was how I got into kind of coding, but it was more of a mule approach where I was pulled into it rather than like really excited about it and really embracing it. As I was getting to the end of my academic career there, I realized that I wanted to get out of academia. I was really happy with the work that I had done, but I wanted to get out into the real world and start doing real things. So I had to double down on that computer science aspect and actually get good at that stuff. Worked as a software engineer for a bit, and then I got my break into data science with a company that no longer exists, but at the time they were called Sotera Defense Solutions. So I was doing data science for a defense contractor. Most of the work that we did there was for DARPA. So we were we're fulfilling DARPA contracts. I never worked for DARPA. I'm trying to be clear about that. And I got to work on the X-Data project, among other things. But the X-Data project was really cool because the X-Data project was this project where the federal government decided, hey, we're paying a lot of money to kind of develop these technologies. And then these defense contractors like get paid for R&D, and then they turn around and sell it back to us. And so the whole kind of like onus behind this was like, we're going to fund open sourced big data projects. So Anaconda was partially funded through this. Spark was partially funded through this. The Julia computing language was partially funded through this. Then there's some kind of other really cool like little one-off things that are probably like less known. So there's a lot of like technologies that are like really super prevalent within the data science community that I was like an extremely early adopter on. So I always like to joke with folks, like I've been using Spark since it was on version 0.3. And so like when like they initially introduced data frames into Spark, like I was annoyed because I really liked RDDs, and I'm like, I don't want to have to learn a different way to use Spark. Data frames are way more efficient. Everybody should use them, obviously, but at the time it was a real nuisance. After a while of doing that, we did some good work there, but at the end of the day, I didn't really love working in defense. I had the opportunity to teach at a technology immersive program called Galvanize. So I made that transition. I really loved my time at Galvanize. I just actually met up with one of my former students last night, and we were talking about it. It was this really cool program where people who did a lot of hard work to get themselves prepared for the program came in and like in a very short amount of time learned an extraordinarily large amount of material about data science. So for the right people, it was a really good program. It was a pretty grueling program. It was a pretty cool career step for me because you got to teach data science. So you really had to be very strong at like explaining things. Really had to have your base under you for a pretty wide array of topics. But then on top of that, the students would do projects over the course of the cohorts. And so it was the sort of thing where I got really good at seeing what a good project was versus a bad project. And you could get really good at predicting whether or not a project had legs, which has helped me a lot as I've transitioned here to Closed Loop. So from Galvanize, I did transition over here to Closed Loop, and it's been a dream job. As I mentioned, my dad was in kind of computing for the Cleveland Clinic, and my mom was a nurse within the Cleveland Clinic, and before then a different health system in the greater Cleveland area. So they both were like in the healthcare industry. And if you would have asked me before I started here if I would like healthcare, the answer probably wouldn't have been yes. Like I didn't really know it, but I don't know that I was necessarily like super excited about healthcare coming into the position. And having said that, I don't think that I ever want to work in any other industry ever again.
That is a great platform to set up explaining who Closed Loop are as a business, because you guys are truly unique. I appreciate the background and the journey, and it's great to hear that you've come full circle and you've touched on it there, how coming across healthcare, the impact that you guys are having has now got you feeling like you don't ever want to step outside it. But let's take a step back for anyone listening who's not familiar with Closed Loop AI. Can you explain the business, who you are, what you do, the mission, and then we can go into some of the details of as to what makes Closed Loop so special?
So Closed Loop is a data science platform and specific to the healthcare industry. So there are other kind of platforms out there that are doing kind of auto ML stuff, but really our flag in the ground is an industry focus. And what the platform does is it supports rapid experimentation and kind of iteration, that kind of good scientific best practice of kind of experimentation, turning things around, looking at modifying things. And the way that we're specific to the healthcare industry is that we have a library or kind of a feature store. I've heard it described like a billion ways, but like more or less a feature store of healthcare specific features that go into the modeling. And so the way that we facilitate that is we have a pretty interesting kind of data pipeline process where we can connect to a wide array of data, basically any format that your data's in, and create this intermediary metadata layer that kind of is what our expectation of what a certain set of data should look like. And then layer on top of that our kind of industry specific features. That's like the broad overview of what Closed Loop is. It's, we're a software company. From a modeling perspective, what we do is, again, it's a very wide array of things. We have a lot of awesome clients that are doing things that are not within what I'm about to talk about is our wheelhouse. But I would describe that like our primary kind of bread and butter is population health models. And population health, I was not familiar kind of with the inner workings of this going into Closed Loop. What population health is that the way that Medicare works, we'll limit the conversation to Medicare. Right? So Medicare covers the entire country. It's the biggest health insurance provider in the country. And right, that's just too big. And so for a given area, Medicare can look at their Medicare population and say, based on this type of disease burden that folks are carrying, we have an expectation that it should be like X expensive to insure this group of folks. And an organization can then come in and say, hey, we agree that it's like normally outside of intervention, it's going to take X to insure these folks. But what we're going to do is we're going to run these population health programs, and we're going to insure them for less by making sure that this group of people ultimately is healthier than they would be outside of us running these programs. So again, kind of healthcare specific understanding. It's a well-established fact within kind of the healthcare industry that the top 5% of kind of the sickest people account for something like 95% of all healthcare costs. And so if you can go in and work with these people and say, hey, let's help you manage your chronic condition. Let's get you on a good cadence as far as taking your medications. Let's get you interacting with a primary care provider. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you can move the needle there. You can, in fact, take folks who may have otherwise had these catastrophic medical events like a long-term inpatient admission or heavy ED utilization and get them using their doctor and the health system in the right way.
Mm-hmm. And it really speaks to the fact that you guys are tackling what is overwhelmingly the largest problem in the short term within the US healthcare system is the utilization and that percentage. So any impact that you guys can have there is obviously massive.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
I want to now get your take on your role and how it's evolved as the director of data science, because prior to ClosedLoop, you had not necessarily worked in the healthcare space, but a lot of what you've done in your previous career was transferable. Could you speak about that and give us some insight as to what the transition was like for you? What did you learn? What were the challenges and how you were able to navigate that shift in role?
We have a chief health analytics officer by the name of Carol McCall, and she's an absolute rock star in the industry. I'm a pretty well-read guy. I like going out and finding academic papers. I like going out and learning about the industry. And I do consider kind of myself a lifelong learner and very hungry to learn things. And I have never taken a paper to her that she hasn't already read. So the key, if you're trying to break into a new industry, of course, is to cheat. So we have her as a resource, and she gets all of our data scientists smart on the health system pretty ably. Dave DiCaprio, the CTO, is also very knowledgeable. He's been working in kind of healthcare and life sciences the majority of his career, although he is a computer scientist by training. So the nice thing is we have a lot of top level organizational knowledge. And the company, I would say that one of our kind of like company values or one of the things that's really strong within our company culture is that you're never too busy to help a coworker. And having multiple people in the C-suite who are very generous with their time and kind of experience of sharing that with folks and getting them up and running on things has led to this like really great atmosphere where everybody's helping one another. We're all learning. We're all making each other better.
Thank you for that, Joe. So you and I were speaking previously about the impact ClosedLoop has been able to have and somewhat disproportionate to the size of the company and some great recent examples of that. Can you give us some insight into some of the wins you're having and maybe some of the recognition you're getting in this space, which will really sort of put some weight behind just how amazing ClosedLoop is?
I think that the elephant in the room is that very recently we were announced as the winner of the CMS AI challenge. CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So it is Medicare. And 2 years ago now, they put out this like open prompt of use AI to make Medicare better, right? I think it was slightly more specific than that, but that was about as general as the prompt was. I believe they had something like 300 individual groups put in kind of proposals for, hey, if we were to be in this competition, this is the type of thing that we would try to work with and do. And we think that this would be the impact. From those 300 groups, there were kind of 25 participants that were selected, of which we were one. And the other groups that, just for kind of expectation setting, the Mayo Clinic, IBM, Watson, the big consulting groups and academic researchers, other folks that were doing modeling. So it was a pretty wide array of entrants, a lot of really talented groups throughout the country. So the first kind of round of it was still pretty open-ended. It was pick an outcome, build a model, and go from there. And so the competition was broken out into three areas in which we were kind of adjudicated. One was, of course, the quality of the predictive model. Right. If we say that somebody is going to have XYZ happen, does it in fact happen? And most data scientists will be familiar with that. The other two aspects of it, which I thought were really great, was explainability. So given that I've made a set of prediction and I give it to a clinician or a social worker or another kind of caregiver, do they believe this? If I put this prediction in their hands, what type of factor evidence can I provide that will lead someone to actually want to act on these predictions and believe these predictions? So that was the kind of the second major component, was this explainability, the way that non-data scientists would interact with these sets of predictions. And then the third was about bias within the model. There's a lot of like really famous examples of bias within algorithmic modeling, in particular within the healthcare industry. And so the third major component was going in and saying, okay, are these models biased? So you have to be able to measure whether or not the model is biased, and then do a bit of a deep dive on, okay, if it is biased, is there anything that you can do to mitigate that bias and make it unbiased? And go through and explain kind of your procedure for unbiasing, what that means, what the procedure is to mitigate or eliminate bias within the model, and the various steps there. That was a big part of what I contributed to this overall project. I should say that this is not something that I did as a lone wolf by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, our CTO, Dave DiCaprio, kind of led the charge. Carol McCall was instrumental in driving that. And then the rest of the data science team and the platform engineers also had heavy contributions. So it was a real team effort.
And the fact that ClosedLoop were selected as the winner in amongst all of those other competitors really speaks to just how innovative and impactful what you're doing is, which leads nicely into something you and I were speaking about just before we started recording, as I wanted to find out ways that you could help explain to our listeners why ClosedLoop are so successful, why it's so impactful. And what you touched on was the approach of the agile data science methodology from model to production, which is tackling the problem that you're trying to solve. Can you talk on that topic and give us some insight into why the environment at ClosedLoop is able to accomplish this at a much higher rate than some of the other companies who are trying this themselves?
I think that the one big reason that we were able to overcome some real powerhouses within the industry is our kind of philosophy and our approach to data science. One quote that Dave has, he's on a first name basis in the context here because I've mentioned him enough, is that everything is just a high school science fair project until it changes a human life. And particularly for folks like me who come from an academic background, I think that it's a real trap to get into where you see what you're doing as satisfying your academic curiosities, and you're noodling on things, and you're indefinitely iterating to try to create these perfect models. And just philosophically, that is an anti-pattern that needs to completely be eliminated from data science as an industry, because, and you were talking about this is a common reoccurring theme, it's deeply problematic and it's discrediting to the industry as a whole. So we take a very much opposite approach to how we develop models. And the other thing is, I don't think of what I do for a living as building models. I think of what I do for a living as solving problems. And the model is a component to an overall greater solution. There's the little silly like ticky-tacky holy wars within the field of data science, R or Python. And the other one is data analytics versus data scientists. And that's just a really stupid distinction in my mind. We should all just be data problem solvers, right? And if the right tool for the job is a dashboard and a rule, then that's great. You solved a problem. If the right tool for the job is an analytic model, then that's the right tool for the job. And so the lines in the sand that we draw are just so arbitrary and dumb that we have to get away from it.
Wait, when you say we, you're talking about the industry in general, just to clarify that distinction. But you're absolutely, yeah. And those, how hung up we seem to get on those points is indicative of the high failure rate for data science projects, which most recently I think was at an absurd number, like 94%, and has grown consistently over the past 4 years. So we need to speak about what you're talking about more and more, so that data scientists at all levels can be focused on impact to the business as the number one objective. Joe, I want to finish on having you talk to us about the team and the group there at ClosedLoop, because you've spoken about everything you do so passionately, but one of the things you and I have discussed previously was what a great team you guys have assembled. So can you give us some insight into what it's like to be working at ClosedLoop, from the entry-level data scientists and engineers right the way up to C-suite, and what you love most about working there?
Yeah, we're a pretty small company. We're right around 30 employees right now. So the distance from the newest employee to the CEO is pretty small as far as physically. I think their offices are right next to each other. But in reality, like I said, I love this place. I love working here. This is my horse is certainly hitched to this buggy at this moment. And from an experience standpoint, I think I've talked about a few cultural things, but we're really just a group of people that are really excited and passionate about changing lives. We don't really care about like the silly, oh, this model versus that model. That's really not like what anybody around here cares. We're working on really hard and important problems, right? Can we help Medicaid patients? Can we help poor, disenfranchised people get better quality of care? Can we close the health equity gap? Can we reduce the cost of care and keep Medicare from being this runaway train? And can we preserve the quality of life that we're able to use through medicine? And those are the type of people that we look for and we want on the team. The thing that's been really rewarding to me from my previous role is that we've had a lot of success bringing people in from non-traditional backgrounds. Obviously, as a person who instructed at Galvanize for a while, I've had a lot of success kind of pulling in some former students. I knew who I really enjoyed working with, and I had the pleasure of working with a lot of really talented people over the years, many of whom do not have PhDs or maybe the traditional academic backgrounds that a lot of people work with. I should say that we don't foo-foo the computer scientists. We have a lot of really talented computer scientists here too. And of course, Dave, the CTO, has a computer science background himself. But we believe in kind of diversity of backgrounds, diversity of opinions, and we think that just leads to a better and more holistic team.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Final question, Joe. What are you most excited about for Closed Loop looking ahead into the next couple of years, given the level of success you've already have with being such a small unit? What type of growth can you expect across the team?
Yeah, so we're definitely in a hiring phase right now. We're definitely looking to grow. From my perspective, the thing that I'm most excited about is just expanding the scope, expanding the reach. I believe that we're very good at this, right? And that's maybe the most arrogant way of saying it, but at the end of the day, the problems we're attacking are useful and important and good to be working on. And you want somebody who thinks that they're up to the task. As the team continues to grow, the thing that excites me is just being able to help more people. With every single one of our clients, I believe that what our clients are trying to do is really important work. And the ability to partner with some folks that are just very insightful and forward thinking within the industry is really exciting. And every time we sign a new client, that's just more people that we're trying to help, we're able to help. And that's really, that sounds like a life well lived to me.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. Great to learn about your background, your journey, and how you've come full circle. Closed Loop sounds incredible. Congratulations again to you and the team on the recent award. And moreover, the impact that you're having on the industry is something that we need to see grow at scale. So we wish you and your team all the best in the months and years to come in achieving that mission. Thank you again.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.